But look, there is another element to this High Court story, and that is the frazzled PR spinning of the Minister, Clare O'Neil. Our political editor, Andrew Clennell, had a great scoop this week, and it sent the government into crisis management.
Kieran, Sky News can reveal the Australian government were desperately attempting through its US embassy, while Anthony Albanese was on his state dinner visit to the US, to get the US State Department to agree to have the child sex criminal detainee NZYQ resettled in the US. This is according to documents filed with the High Court. The subsequent victory of NZYQ a month later in that court led to, as we know, the indefinite detention of immigration detainees being banned in Australia.
Now, the government had repeatedly insisted that they had no idea they would lose the High Court case. Minister O'Neil made this claim many times, including in this interview just a week before Clennell broke that story.
We were advised that it was likely that the Commonwealth would win the case, that is, allow us to do what we wanted to do, which is keep these people in detention.
How recently did you receive that advice?
Well, we received that advice from the Department of Home Affairs, who tell us what chances we have of success and failure in each legal case. But I do need you to understand that
when did you receive that advice?
I do need you to understand that our department is one of the most litigated against departments of the Commonwealth.
You could already see the cracks starting to appear. How could O'Neil be seriously arguing the government shouldn't be blamed because it was told they would win the case when secretly they were making contingency plans? This tells me the government knew very well the case was doomed, but made no practical efforts to stop these hardened criminals being released into our streets. O'Neil is under some serious pressure, which is why her social media strategy is so interesting. Yesterday, she wrote, "Peter Dutton talks tough, but the records show he will do anything to score political points rather than keep the community safe." Now, there was tweet after tweet along the same lines, with this minister acting as if she was still in opposition, sniping from the sideline. But eventually, O'Neil took it a step too far and labelled Mr Dutton a protector of pedophiles.
We have seen 3 weeks of the most shameless politics I have virtually ever seen played in this parliament. And that included, Speaker, included the opposition's unbelievable action earlier this week, where we brought a proposal to this parliament, the Minister for Immigration brought a proposal to this parliament to strengthen the laws that we passed to criminalise pedophiles loitering near schools. A pretty uncontroversial proposal. But what did they do? They came in and they voted against it. And there was only one reason for that, because they put politics above the safety of the Australian community.
And Labor Minister Annika Wells agreed.
The Home Affairs Minister has accused Peter Dutton of being a protector of pedophiles. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and not only that, but this whole mess that we're facing and trying to clean up now didn't start a couple of weeks ago when the High Court decision was handed down. It started a couple of years ago when Peter Dutton was the minister responsible and made a decision to allow NZYQ to apply for a visa instead of deporting him.
Sophie, putting aside the political elements for a moment, as a media writer, you probably watch some of these crises to see how people act in these situations. For me, this looked like a lot of inexperience, and it looked like somebody who still was acting as if they were in opposition, that a good solution to this was to blame it on the previous government. What's your thought?
Jack, really interesting remarks that you make there, but I think this shows in the media that these politicians are really scrambling, they're getting desperate and they're taking cheap shots. And when this is, portrayed in the media and these clips go out and these interviews with these politicians, the Australian public are not stupid. They can make their own minds up. Does anyone seriously think that the opposition leader is a protector of pedophiles? I highly doubt that, but the fact that these ministers are coming out saying that, and then it just results in days and days of coverage predominantly negative coverage because it's shown that they're taking cheap shots that really seem quite ridiculous. So I think their media strategy kind of seems to be all over the place at the moment, and it screams to me of a government that is very worried and in damage control. And I think, Jack, they'll just be relieved that the end of the year is coming, because the last week has definitely not painted the government's media strategy or the comments by their ministers in a good light.
Yeah, Christy, Sophie makes such a great point. It goes down to, I guess, a question of plausibility, doesn't it? Peter Dutton, Labor's main criticism of him is he's too hard on crime. And now they're trying to get the Australian public to accept that it's actually Peter Dutton is soft on crime, you know, a man who's a police officer by his career, his origins. That's their explanation for it. Do you think the Australian public cares about this argy-bargy, or do they just want it fixed?
I think the Australian public cares deeply about why a number of dangerous murderers, criminals, rapists, pedophiles were allowed out into the Australian community, and why the government appears to be confused about what advice they received and when. And this attack on Peter Dutton is going to backfire. All it's done is enable the coalition to talk up Peter Dutton's record on fighting crimes against children, women, domestic violence victims, and point out to anybody who didn't know that he is a former serving police officer, that has been his career, and that he has a particular commitment to working in child sexual abuse from his time working in that unit in the police force. So anybody in Australia who doesn't like what the government's allowed happened is now learning about Peter Dutton's history as a protector of children in this country. And it is absolutely ridiculous to slur, by virtue of these attacks on Peter Dutton, every member of the opposition who voted, when all the opposition has done is put forward amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment that the government has adopted because the government hasn't written their bill correctly. And why? Because, as we've now seen, Jack, they don't know when they received the advice and what it was.